bones forming the foot. We have tarsal, metatarsal, and then we have the phalanges. Now, what are the tarsal? The first tarsal, which is forming the ankle joint, is called talus, and below the talus, the longest bone is called the calcaneum. Now, how you are going to be asked? You are going to be asked. First thing you have to do is that you have to identify the bones. So easily you can identify the talus, which is the first bone, and it's forming the ankle joint. And below the talus is the calcaneum, which is the longest bone here, which is having 6 sides: anterior, posterior, inferior, superior, lateral, and the medial surface. Then you can see there is a unique bone here, which is anterior to the talus. Actually, talus is having the body, neck, and the head. So if you can see here in this part, you can easily see that this is the convex part of the talus, which is anterior to the neck, and we used to call this as the head of the talus. So talus is having the body, the neck, and the head, which is convex. Now anterior to, you can see in this, the anterior to the talus is a navicular bone, which is boat shaped. This is very important to know here. The shape of this bone, which is a boat shaped, and it's forming the concavity, the socket. So the ball is formed by the head of the talus, and the socket is formed by the concavity of the navicular bone. So this joint, the talo-navicular joint, is one of the example of the ball and socket joint. So remember, this is also important to remember that most of the joint here are plain synovial joint, except joints formed by the navicular bone, because it is not plain. So the joint, whatever is formed between the navicular bone and the adjacent bone, are not example of the plain synovial joint. For example, the joint forming between the head of the talus and navicular is an example of ball and socket joint. Similarly, you can see anteriorly we have the cuneiform bone. So again, the joint formed between the navicular and the cuneiform is again not a plain synovial joint. Okay, so we have seen talus, navicular, talus, calcaneum, and navicular. Now anterior to the navicular, we have 3 cuneiform bone from medial to lateral, and they are named so. They are medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiform bones. Okay. Now there is one more bone here, which is anterior to the calcaneum, and that we used to call it as a cuboid. Now you can see the surface, they are almost plain. So the joint forming between these two joints is the plain synovial joint. So now again I repeat it. This is the talus. Below the talus we have the calcaneum. Anterior to the talus we have navicular bone, and anterior to navicular bone we have 3 cuneiform, starting from the medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiform. Similarly, the bone anterior to the calcaneum is the cuboid bone. Now these are the tarsal, and then the next row is the metatarsal bone, which are from first, or you can first, second, third, fourth, and fifth metatarsal, and they're example of long bone. Only difference is that the base is the proximal, then there is the shaft, and the head is distally placed. So this is the first metatarsal, which you can see is the strongest and thickest, and then this is the fifth metatarsal. Then anterior to the metatarsal we have phalanges. In phalanges we have, in the first we have only proximal and distal, others we have proximal, middle, and distal. Thank you.